From the kitchen of the cabin, a look at the games that made us who we are in Ben and Steve's Advent Calendar. Well, here we are, the 11th of December. Glorious day, and I'm still, unfortunately, speaking to Stephen all the way over the Atlantic, but this time he's not in the glitzy confines of Manhattan City. He's out in the boonies in New Jersey. How is it out there, Stevie?
I'm literally holding the power adapter to my computer into the wall outlet because this house is so old, it just won't stay in.
Do you find
that's how it is? That's how it is. Six broken coffee pots, a microwave, 2 VHS tape rewinders, 10 TV remote controls. These are a few of my favorite things left in this house in the basement, scattered throughout various abandoned bedrooms that I've had to package up and bring to the city dump yesterday.
Is it not an indication of our lives that we just accrue loads of useless shit, both materialistically and also upon our souls, Steve?
I mean, this has been truly an educational experience to me, almost like a wake-up call or maybe like a warning. So as I was breaking down the 700 cardboard boxes that are for some reason scattered throughout the basement this morning, I was thinking I've got to turn this somehow into a metaphor for the recording today. And I haven't quite gotten there yet, but there is like this sort of like acquisitive hoarding aspect to board games, right? And the way that this series has been going, we do that with our memories too. That's as far as I've gotten with it.
So I think, and now this is just a bit of pop psychology here, but I think the more unhappy you are, the more inclined you are to be driven towards the material. I think this is why companies like Netflix, like Amazon, want us to be disenfranchised from people around us. Because the minute we're disenfranchised from those around us, we become unhappy, and when we're unhappy, we consume, Steve. What do you think of that as a theory?
I think it's as legitimate a piece of pop psychology as I've ever heard. And speaking of whatever it is we're speaking of, no, I'm just using this as an excuse to talk about Playboy magazine because I found in the basement of the house, I mean, this is just like a cliche, right? A box of Playboy magazines from the 1960s. And I know what you're thinking.
Whose were they?
I don't know. My father thinks that my former boss at the restaurant that she worked at in the 1930s through the 1970s, I think. He gave them to her to give to him in the 1960s, and they've been down there ever since. This house has been through hurricanes Irene and Sandy, which, for those of you who don't know, devastated the eastern seaboard of the United States. Like
your first edition D&D as well.
Years ago. Yes. Deities and Demigods, Fiend Folio, Unearthed Arcana, Manual of the Planes. I had Temple of Elemental Evil. I had everything. I had Greyhawk. I had Dark Sun and Planescape and Ravenloft, Ben and First.
It's all dead, Steve. It's all dead.
God. But I felt like somehow, despite having lost the work of my youth in piecing this collection together painstakingly through eBay transactions and visiting board game stores, I felt like a burden had been lifted from me. Like I was almost given like a fresh beginning, a
burden
new
of loads
life.
of cash.
No,
you've been separated from the potential of loads of money.
But I was never looking to sell these things, but I want to get back to the Playboys. So,
well, don't we all?
Basically, all of these magazines were.
I'm reading a grot mag while you're talking. It's much more interesting than listening to your bollocks.
A grot mag. They were like, because of like the flooding, they had basically like, I don't know, sealed themselves into a brick-like structure. Like you couldn't open the magazines. It was just like a solid brick of
oh yes, because of the hurricane. That's right.
There was one on top though. There was one on top that you could open, and I was like actually quite amazed because you kind of like think about these things in the abstract. And there's this running joke, oh, I like Playboy, but only for the articles. But actually, 99% of this magazine is articles. This was a
Right.
thick magazine. I mean,
Classy magazine.
yeah, I mean, practically a booklet. I don't know how many pages. It's like 80 pages or something. And it's like loads of articles and like tiny text. It's like an interview with Orson Welles in this particular issue, and like quite amusing, slightly risque cartoons. And yeah, there are pictures of naked women, but on like a handful of pages. I mean, the rest of it seems like pretty highbrow or at least middlebrow content. And you don't really see this in magazines anymore. You don't really see magazines anymore, or bookstores, or interviews with Orson Welles. So yeah, I'm starting off this particular episode with a bit of a note of cynicism. The world is shit. Everything was better in the past.
There was loads of hurricanes in around Tenbury Wells in Worcestershire around 1994. That's why all of my fucking jazz mags were fused together.
I think Tunbridge Wells is still getting over the 1977 apocalypse of Hurricane Ben.
You'll fucking pronounce the name of the fucking place correctly. Anyway, we're talking about nostalgia and carbuncles on our soul from past trauma. Now, I think the game you've chosen today is an allusion to one of your favourite works of literature, and I think that's part of the reason you love this game.
Ooh,
and of course,
now you're psychologizing me.
Now, of course, all the Elizabethan literature fans out there have already got it, but for those who haven't, I'm talking about Fairy Queen by Spenser and its modern-day equivalent, Pixie Queen, the board game. Tell us about Pixie Queen, and also, if you want, because, you're dying to, because you're just endless facts all the time. Endless facts about Fairy Queen by Spenser and how it feeds into your love for this game.
I never made that connection before, but can you imagine the feeling I had when I decided to apply for an English literature PhD, and the reason was that I had discovered this epic poem as an undergrad, and I had to go tell like my sort of working class inclined father that my favorite poem, and the reason I wanted to devote my adult professional life to studying a poem called The Fairy Queen. I don't think I ever really quite came out with it, but yeah, it's a tremendous work of literature. I mean, unique in its weird, archaic language and poetic form, and the fact that it was written in sort of a tribute, but also in a kind of, let's say, allegorical critique of the reign and era of Queen Elizabeth. And it contains within it a kind of summa of all of the myths of Britannia, from King Arthur to like the Crusades and the questing beast, which I think appeared again in T.S. White's The Once and Future King. Which, by the way, I don't think anyone should go out and read The Fairy Queen. You won't like it, but you will like The Once and Future King. Have you read that?
I haven't. I've read bits of The Fairy Queen. Boring old crap, isn't it? It's no Paradise Lost, is it? Paradise Lost is full of all the celebs.
I mean, we're going to have it out on Paradise Lost versus Fairy Queen. This is actually like I would say like a chasm between people who study Renaissance lit. I don't even think Paradise Lost is part of Renaissance literature. But let's not get
Milton's
into it.
Great.
Let's not get into
Milton's
this debate.
Great, isn't he?
Oh, it's so boring, so tedious.
Oh no, really good.
So sanctimonious. Satan's great. That's about it.
Spenser's so boring.
I mean, when Marios appears in Paradise, when Satan appears in Paradise Lost, that's the only good bit. Fairy Queen, you've got to enjoy the poetry. You have to enjoy allegory, and I bet you probably don't enjoy allegory in principle.
Well, I'm working class. I don't want none of your middle class allegory.
Yeah,
I mean, get some of this. Steve, get some of this.
Explains everything.
Get some of this. Of man's first disobedience of the fruit of that forbidden tree, whose mortal taste brought death into the world and all our woe. I mean, if someone's starting like that, you're starting with a bang, aren't you? You know what I mean?
I think what I can say about Milton, what's impressive is that he dictated all of this to an amanuensis. He didn't write it down. It just came out of his brain fully formed and made it to the page.
I need an amanuensis.
Yeah.
Will you be my amanuensis? You're kind of like my amanuensis, isn't you?
What about this? A gentle knight was pricking on the plain, y-clad in mighty arms and silver
like
shield,
pricking.
wherein old dints of deep wounds did remain, the cruel marks of many a bloody field. Yet arms till that time did he never wield, his angry steed did chide his foaming bit, as much disdaining to the curb to yield. Full jolly knight he seemed, and fair did sit, as one for knightly jousts and fierce encounters fit.
With loss of Eden till one greater man restore us and regain the blissful seat. Sing, heavenly muse, on that secret top of Oreb and of Sinai, didst inspire that shepherd who first taught the chosen seed in the beginning how the heavens and earth rose out of chaos, or if Sion hill delight thee more, or Siloa's brook that flowed fast by the oracle of God, I thence invoke thy aid to my adventurous song that with no middle flight intends to soar above the Aeonian mount, while it pursues things unattempted, yet in prose or rhyme. Spelt with an I, not with a Y. Anyway, so...
Yeah. You're reading the good bit, and for the next 10,000 pages, it's fucking boring, snoring Christian bullshit.
All right, tell us about Pixie Queen, then, and why you like Pixie Queen.
So I wanted to begin the sort of like second round of games that we talk about with...
What do you mean second round? There's been no second round. Are you implying that there's been two recording sessions?
There's been like chunks. No. I mean like the sort of like chunks of 10, right? So the first 10 were games from like the first era of my gaming career. The next group for me, well, not first 10, I guess first 5. The next 5 for me anyway, are sort of the games I've discovered in the last 5-6 years since I moved to Berlin that have really helped me to appreciate all that games are capable of. Because in the 90s, I mean, it was all new for me. I played games for fun. Now I'm discovering them as like a form of creativity, which is completely different. I had never looked at games before as works of art, the way you like to talk about them. Now it's like, I want to see something new. I want the clever mechanism. I want to kind of explore what the art form is capable of. I think having this mentality that it's an art form enables you to do that. At least it makes me very curious to see what games are capable of doing. Why I like Pixie Queen? It's the negative points. Honestly, it's the negative points. You spend the entire game getting whipped and punished by the Pixie Queen, which is kind of sexy. I think we can all admit that. But you're going to win this game with like negative 10 points. You're going to lose points every turn. It's like, it's grueling. Like every turn, you're basically competing with the other players to not lose as many points as they do. And you would think that this wouldn't work because it's just like a negative experience. And I keep losing points. I don't feel like I'm making progress. But the game has like enough of a sense of humor about it. And I think it's like carefully constructed enough that it totally works. It's totally a great time. It's got like worker placement, but also a little bit of take that. And also kind of a bit of a race because you're trying to like promote your pixies to get them into the Pixie Queen's court or whatever. There's lots of different things that you can do. I mean, you can probably ascribe this to it being like, to a certain extent, Silver Age of board games like FAF, but nevertheless, I played this game and loved it the first time, and it made me love the company, Game Brewer, and I started buying all their games. Now, I don't think every single one has been a success, but I think it's the first time I decided I'm going to follow a publisher. I mean, there are only a few publishers where I would say, so how do you choose what games that you're going to buy? You can go with designers, you can go with publishers, you can go with the box art. I think this is maybe the first time, other than Splotter, let's say the first sort of mainstream publisher where I thought, irrespective of the designers themselves, they seem to have a taste that comports with mine, and I'm gonna like follow them and keep track of them. And also when we go to Essen, get like horribly drunk at their booth because they serve Belgian beer.
So this is the time of the podcast where I have a rant about America, and so I think
let me just put my headset down and go have a coffee.
I think the gaming landscape that we see today is by and large an American one. I think what's fascinating is that we have seen. So I think the mechanics and the way games are constructed are still by and large European, especially Euro games, but there's something about the innate optimism of Americans that dictate they don't want their objects of recreation to be too difficult, to be too, not difficult, that's not fair, but to be too punishing, to be too harsh. Whereas there is a European idea that life's a bitch and then we die, right? So just deal with it. And so I think the Skinner box nature of many modern Eurogames are to a large degree influenced by American tastes. What I love about Pixie Queen, and I haven't seen this in any other Game Brewer games, if I'm honest. What I love about Pixie Queen is that it's unremittingly harsh on the players. It is a challenge in the way that if you compare it to another game that's actually a lot lighter, but in the same way still trades on that harshness, is Patchwork, right? If you're talking about negative points, it's very difficult to come out of that game with any credit, especially if you don't play well. And I think why I like Pixie Queen and why I was surprised when I played it was that, wow, this is a modern game that feels like a game of 15 years ago. It feels like a game that has an ethos of challenge that you see so rarely. And I get it, right? I get it. Not every game, you don't want to play every game where it beats you around, but sometimes it's very refreshing, right?
So you like this game?
I do.
Sure.
I mean, I only played it once with you, but I really enjoyed it when I did.
I've played it now. So we often talk about how we just are always playing new games, and it's just like hard to even get a sense of a game. This game keeps making it to the table for me. It seems somehow, I don't want to say definitive. It's going to be like part of the bedrock of my collection because I think it works as a game. I think it's clever, and I know maybe it's that slight like wryness, that sense of humor that it's there as a subtext in the game, but it sort of doesn't take center stage. It's not like the game isn't trying to be funny. It doesn't overwhelm the mechanisms the way I can't think of an example right now.
Lost Will.
I mean games that try so hard to be funny that they'd end up not working, or they try so hard to be something, try so hard to fit the mechanics to the theme maybe or the sensibility. They end up not working. This, I think, is much more subtext. I mean, I think splatter games are like this as well. They don't seem to have a sense of humor, but they all do in a way.
There's something very in keeping with the theme, right? I think the harshness and the punishment of Pixie Queen is somehow in keeping with the mischievous nature of fairies and that, isn't it?
What do you mean?
Well, this idea that you get slapped around, that's very much, we think of fairies as something else now, but if you go back to sort of, Shakespeare, Midsummer Night's Dream, Fairy Queen by Spenser, fairies are a mischievously malign force, right? There is a sort of almost sadistic glee in the way they interact with humans. And I think Fairy Queen evokes that, right?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of folklore that it's sort of like open source mythology. It's open ended. You can do with it whatever you want. And I think we normally think of fairies and pixies in a very benign way. I think because of Robin Hood or something. But this is the dark side of that. And
because we believe in them less, right?
Tolkien is the dark side of it as well. I think originally he was even going to call the elves fairies because to him the word fairy it doesn't evoke what it evokes for us. I mean, it has connotations that either didn't exist or he wasn't thinking about at the time. No, but for him, you like to use this word evocative, so I'll use it too. It is evocative of this whole sort of supernatural undercurrent to Western culture that we've largely forgotten, or it's been sort of Christianized out of existence.
Well, again, it's American sanitization, right? I mean,
why everything for you goes back to what America has done?
Well, sure, because
what has America ever done to you?
America is a puritanical society, and when we think of pixies now, we think of Tinkerbell from Peter Pan. That's when we think of fairies and pixies. That's what lies in our head, eternally sweet and pure. And it's definitely an evocation of that puritanical sort of American spirit, right?
I was listening to the audiobook for Fellowship of the Ring again recently, And you know that moment when Galadriel refuses the One Ring, and is it her who says that she will diminish, and then the elves will become what is it? They will become a people of cave and dell or something like that. I think I didn't realize like the elves who don't go to the Western realm, the ones who stay in Middle Earth are the ones who stay. They like recede into the background as men take over and basically become like figures of folklore and mythology. I didn't ever make that connection before. That is the point. Like the ones who stay are the ones who become the sort of like mischievous, unseen, the rustic people of cave and dell, right? You don't know if you really saw one. You think that they're there. People in Iceland still believe in them. And, many thousands of years later, after the fall of Sauron, we get a board game like Pixie Queen.
Thank you for listening to this show and indulging our overweening nostalgia. If you would like to support the show, you can do that by going to patreon.com/5G4D. And we both wish you a very Merry Christmas.